We don't have
Another,
November minutes?
of the three owners of the half interest. It's, the property's going to one of the three owners, and one of the
Okay.
three owners.
Understood.
owns The other half.
Okay, good evening, everyone. The time is 6:07. This is the Township of Springfield Board of Adjustment meeting, December 20th, 2022. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with the Sunshine Law. Notice was published on September 30th, 2021 in the local source, the official newspaper for the Township of Springfield for the year 2021-2022, posted in the Annex Building on October 1st, 2021, and notice was also given on the Springfield Township's website. Can we stand to salute the flag, please?
To the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we please have a roll call? Thank you.
Mr. Mark Cunningham. Stephen Hochstein. Mr. Daniel Poltrock. Mr. Stephen Furstenbaum.
Present.
Mr. Raj A. Sahada. Mr. Weckstein.
Here.
Mr. Glass. Vice Chair Lawfer. And Chairwoman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, the first order of business is the adoption of the minutes from October 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? Do any members of the board have any questions or comments? If there are none, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Thank you. Resolutions up for memorialization. First resolution is for application 2022-20. This is 57 Twin Oaks Oval, Block 2002, Lot 10. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the resolution? Are there any questions, comments? If there are none, is there a motion to approve?
I move.
I'll second.
Sahada?
Yes.
Chair Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham? Yes. Mr. Furstenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Weckstein?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next resolution up for memorialization is application 2022-22, 81 Kane Street, Block 905, Lot 18. Has everyone had an opportunity to review? Are there any questions or concerns? If there's none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move. Second.
Mr. Sahada? Yes. Mr. Weckstein?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham? Yes. Mr. Furstenbaum?
Yes.
And Chair Cohen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next resolution for memorialization is application 2021-29, 240 Route 22 West, Block 3701, lots 8 and 10. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the resolution? Are there any questions, comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Oh, motion to approve the resolution.
Denying the application.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Hill.
Okay, Mr. Sahada?
Yes to the resolution as drafted.
Chair Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham? Yes. And Mr. Weckstein?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes to deny.
Okay, the last resolution of up for memorialization is for application 2022-24. This is an application for 950 Mountain Avenue, Block 3901, lots 2. And I believe before we get to the resolution, we have Mr. Pittman and Mr. Hale here to put some information on the record.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and members of the board. My name is Bruce Pittman from Starger and Davison and Rubin. I represent the adjoining property owner, Springfield Diversified, which owns Echo Plaza Shopping Center. The reason I'm here is because when we learned of this application, we ordered the transcript. And with respect to Mr. Glynn's testimony, we want to make it clear, and my client is here, we're prepared to put him on the stand if you reopen the matter. But essentially, the adjoining property owner has in no way, either formally, informally, informal promises, direct promises, or any kind of encouragement that the G&G business will be able to have their customers park on our property. In fact, we'll be putting up specific signs that people using that business will not be permitted to park on that property and would face, towing or fines, et cetera. And we want to clarify that the statements made by Mr. Glynn at page 36, line 9 to 16, and in particular, page 41, line 17, page 42, line 10, are absolutely untrue. I don't want to be harsh and use the words untrue. They are inaccurate to the extreme. There was, while there may have been a conversation with my client's paralegal, there were no conversations with Mr. Kelly, to my knowledge, and certainly no representations of this kind. So if you want to open up the testimony to hear my client, you certainly, that's, we're at your
I
disposal.
don't believe that we're going to need to open the testimony, depending on where the board stands, but I understand your position. And let's hear from Mr. Hale.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, there's, and I had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Pittman and to Mr. Bergen, and there's no problem with the resolution, which obviously Bruce was kind enough to send to us, doesn't rely at all upon the fact that there may be parking other than on our client's property, and we recognize what Mr. Pittman says, and there's no objection to that. It's part of the record now, but again, the resolution doesn't allow that at all. And furthermore, the variance that we sought for parking rests upon, and our testimony rests upon this, our client's piece of property. And in fact, under the criteria for the table seating, we actually met the criteria for the parking. It was when you applied the square footage. So there's no problem. I don't think there's a need to reopen, but we acknowledge what Mr. Pittman says and have no problem with it, with that being on the record and part of the record. And again, the resolution doesn't rely at all upon that.
And you acknowledge on behalf of your client that they have no right to park on our property?
Correct. He's here and he hears it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the resolution that's before us is for the approval of the application, and the question I'm presenting to the board is if you are in favor of moving forward with the resolution, you are indicating that when you approved the application, you did not rely on the testimony regarding the Echo Plaza overflow parking being necessary or as part of the proofs that would, I guess, enable you to make the decision that you agree. So,
Is it just limited to that? I mean, does the false in one, false in all doctrine, and I'm not making any credibility findings, to make it clear, but does that implicate anything else that was testified to by the same person? It could it not?
That would really be a individual determination of the board members.
Do you think we need the other two board members that were here before we make a ruling on that?
if we need the other two board members that were present before we make a ruling on the resolution.
If you were to reopen the record, then there would be a new vote. Under these circumstances, the resolution stands as presented to the board members. So I don't think you need, if you have a quorum here and you get a majority vote for the resolution, I think that would be complete the matter.
Madam Chairperson, my question would be, if the vote changes with the existing board members here, would then it require a revote with the board members that were not present, where if we came into a decision that was different than what we originally decided.
Well, the question, I guess, is, when the decision was made, did the board members rely on Echo Plaza as overflow parking, right? To help prove that the deviation requested could be granted. So, if in fact any board member relied on that, Bruce, I think that that would probably mean that we'd have to open the record, or
I don't know.
it's a new one.
In view of the comments that have been made here, I would think out of an abundance of caution,
We should have the full board.
that the people who were here last time, and again, I'm not prepared to tell you, I think that I have no idea what the answer is, but just out of an abundance of caution and to make sure that the record is not subject to challenge later on, that it ought to be revoted.
Why can't we just ask the applicant if he's okay for us to vote now or not? He would inevitably be the one challenging it.
I have no problem with that.
Mr. Hale, are you okay with us voting now, or would you like us to wait?
Vote isn't on.
It's the resolution.
Just the
I
resolution.
understand that,
Yeah.
but I mean, we're talking about reopening the record.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable in us voting now?
I have no problem, and I guess if the vote doesn't carry, then it's just the question of, do we come
Re-
back?
do- exactly.
Reopen, so, and again, I just want to make clear that the application, the site plan, everything just dealt with this piece of property.
Correct.
I admit that Mr. Glenn was talking about conversations that he may have had, but again, I point out that the parking variance was only for the square footage, not for the seating that
That is accurate.
we applied for.
Thank you, Mr. Hale.
We're under some, obviously, time constraints to get this place up and running, so.
Yep.
Now, we appreciate Mr. Pittman coming and his client being here.
Okay, so I'm going to poll the board. And if the question is whether you would like to wait for a full composition of the board, or if you feel that you would be able to vote on the resolution tonight.
I'm comfortable voting.
Okay.
I'm not.
I think that probably a revote should occur.
Okay, we are going to move to table, right? We're not even gonna vote. We're just going to wait until a full composition of the board is.
Want to take a 2-minute recess?
Yeah, we're gonna take a 2-minute break. We can't do that. We can't do that.
Turn your microphones on.
Yeah, we just need the microphones off.
We can only do that.
Okay, are we back on the record? Okay, great. Okay, we are going to move to table this resolution. We are not going to reopen the record, but we do believe that we do need a full composition of, or at least we need, well, it was a full composition of the board, so we do need all members that were in attendance at the hearing to be here to proceed on the resolution. So a motion to table.
So moved.
Second.
Does this need a roll call, Mr. Bergen?
Yes.
Yes.
Who seconded it?
Cunningham.
Okay, Vice Chair Lawfer?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yes.
Mr. Furstenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Sahada?
No.
Mr. Weckstein?
Yes.
And Chair Cohen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Couldn't hurt.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt. The meeting is scheduled for January 17th, 2023, but I will also ask Mr. Bergen to be in touch with you. I will ask Mr. Bergen, yes, to be in touch with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
You too. Okay, the next order of business is the application that we have before us this evening. It is application 2022-23 Springfield Holdings LLC, 8995 and 109 Victory Road, Block 301, lots 5 and 7. This is a request for a use variance for a self-storage facility.
Is it okay if I sit here, or do you want me to over there?
No, actually, well, yeah, that's fine.
It's fine, okay. No, good evening, Madam Chairperson, members of the board, Jason Tubal, attorney for the applicant. This is a bifurcated use variance application, as the chairwoman indicated, for Block 381, lots 5 and 7. The property is along Victory Road and abuts Route 78 in the rear of the site. So it actually fronts on two roads, but with the rear facing the interstate there. The property currently now is nearly 100% or close to completely paved on the property. There's two structures on it. One is a dance studio, and the other is basically an industrial building. The goal of this project is to redevelop the site with a self-storage facility. 5 stories, approximately 176,000 square feet. Since this is a bifurcated application, what we plan on doing this evening is presenting testimony basically on the 3 D variances that we're seeking. So we have a use variance, which is a D1. Although the property is located in the I-20 district, an industrial district that allows warehousing, manufacturing, uses of that nature, self-storage is not specifically permitted, even though you'll hear from us is somewhat similar or even less intense than those uses, but it is not permitted, and therefore we need a D1. We need a D5 variance for, a D4 variance for FAR, as the property or our proposal has a floor area ratio that exceeds the limit. And we need a D6 height variance since our property or our building will exceed the maximum height in the zone by more than 10%. So the project will be at 55 feet at its highest point, but as you'll hear in the testimony, that high point is about 70 feet back from the property line, and you'll hear that from both our engineer and our architects, that the project is nearly conforming when it's most visible, but does increase as it goes further back to Route 78. The goal also would be to redevelop it by reducing the impervious coverage. So right now, as I indicated before, the existing coverage is at 87.5%, which is over the 72% permitted in the zone. Our goal is to reduce it to about 68.8%. And since this is a bifurcated application, if it were to get approved by the board, we would be back with a site plan at a later date that would have stormwater management as part of its plan, along with a more detailed lighting and landscaping plan as part of that. Just some operational information that you'll hear about the self-storage facility during the course of the testimony, but I think it's important for the board to hear it before they start. So hours of operation, the office will be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 7 days a week. Customers will have access 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week by way of a key fob. There's full security in the building by way of both not only obviously security gates, but also cameras. There are 1 to 2 employees on a shift. Garbage and recycling is once to twice per week. Tenants or customers of the self-storage facility cannot use the dumpster for garbage. So anything in the dumpster on site will be just basically office waste and things generated by the employees. There's no electricity or no running water in any of the units, as I'm sure you're aware, as you've been to many of these facilities. There's also no hazardous waste that's allowed to be kept, or any hazardous materials that are allowed to be kept within the facility as well. So since this is a bifurcated application, I have 3 witnesses that I plan on calling. So our first witness, Matthew Seckler from Stonefield Engineering Design, will qualify him as a civil engineer and a traffic engineer. His civil engineering testimony will be somewhat limited since this is not a full site plan, and he'll get into the traffic and parking as part of the process. The next witness that I'll call is our architect, Louis Vanderloo, who'll go through obviously the building elevations as well as the floor plan. And then if we get to planning this evening, our last witness is our professional planner, Elizabeth McManus from Kyle and McManus. I provided my affidavit of publication and service to the board, and that was on file ahead of time. So, Madam Chair, if there's any other questions for me, I'd be happy to get started and call my first witness.
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay, great. So the first witness I plan on calling is Matthew Seckler from Stonefield Engineering and Design. Sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name, spell your last name, give us your business.
Certainly. My name is Matthew Seckler. That's Seckler. I'm with Stonefield Engineering Design. Address is 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey.
Great, thank you.
Matt, if you could just give the board the benefit of your educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying both as a civil and traffic engineer in the state of New Jersey.
Certainly. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College in Schenectady, New York, a Master's in City and Regional Planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state, also recognized professional traffic operations engineer by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which requires both an examination and experience. I'm practicing for over 15 years in the state of New Jersey, been accepted before 150 boards in the state, including, I believe, this board and the planning board in the township.
All right, I'd ask if the board would accept him as both a civil and traffic engineer.
Your licenses are current?
Yes, they are.
Do any members object to qualifying this witness as an expert in engineering?
No objection.
You may proceed.
Great, thank you. So, Matt, why don't we just get the board oriented to the existing conditions on the site and also some of the unique characteristics of the property, shape and size as well.
Absolutely. Do you want me to hold that mic?
Yeah.
Stand up near the board.
Yes, please.
That mic's not plugged in.
Oh.
Budget.
You're kind of restrained on how far you can go.
Try not to choke him.
That's
just
about
wanna bring
it.
it
Maybe
closer?
you can
Well,
move that up a little
okay.
bit. Yeah.
That actually made it harder to see, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Better?
Yes.
A point from a distance.
We're running into problems from this corner.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Thank you.
There we go. So I'd first like to mark an aerial exhibit It's prepared by Stonefield Engineering Design. The date prepared is December 9th, 2022. It's titled Aerial Exhibit 1 of 2. I guess this would be marked A1. What it shows is an aerial photograph from a Google image showing the subject site, which is outlined in black. And I'm going to try to get close enough without pulling the microphone out. The site is outlined in black. North is generally to the top right corner of the page. You could see Interstate 78 going from the top left of the sheet to the right side of the page. You see Springfield Avenue, which is State Route 124, makes its bend right near the site, and the site is located along the frontage of Victory Road. The site is consisting of 2 properties. It's tax lots 5 and 7 on block 301, addresses 89 and 109 on Victory Road. It's located in the I-20 general industrial zone. In terms of history of the site, it looked back, I think I saw in the mid-60s. These 2 sites generally were what you see here in terms of its building size. At that time, Victory Road, which was Springfield Avenue, actually used to pass through, and through the construction of Interstate 78 in the 60s, kind of ended Victory Road about 500 feet northeast of the site, and then obviously the 124 kind of crossover of 78 was constructed again in those around mid-60s. But again, the buildings you see on the site today seem to date from that time period. In fact, they're looking back at earlier aerial photos from the 50s. Portions of those buildings seem to have existed, and they may have expanded in that decade between the 1950s and 1960s aerial images. As Mr. Tuvell mentioned, we do have frontage on Victory Road as well as Route I-78. The site, I would say, shape is quite unusual. Looks like somewhat of a modified home plate design of the site. But again, what you see on the site is primarily building coverage, a lot of parking and drive aisles. The site today has 3 access points. There's an entrance-only driveway located, I would say, on the Route 124 frontage, a in-and-out driveway located between the 2 buildings themselves, right where the O and the R in Victory on this image A1. And then there's another wide driveway right above the O in Road, providing access, a 3rd access point to the overall site. Going out to the site today, you do see the 2 buildings, one of which operated as I believe it was a kitchen and a cabinet store. The other building, the one closest to the further to the west, that seemed to operate at some sort of performance art type building. Overall, as Mr. Tuvell mentioned, there's a large amount of impervious coverage. In fact, in the existing site, 87.5% of that site is impervious coverage. If you go out to the site today, you'll see a lot of material storage. I don't know if it is discarded materials or materials that are being stored in the back half of the site. There's some loading areas for the kitchen building themselves, and again, just general use of the buildings that have obviously been active for 50, 60 years at this point. What we are proposing, additionally, the lot size is about 67,000 square feet, which is about 3 times what the minimum lot size is for the zone. The site is also considered overly wide per the zone. It's over 3 times the minimum lot width at 368 feet versus the 100 feet that is minimally required.
Matt, just a couple things, just
Yes.
on the coverage. I know you indicated there were 87.5%. Is there any stormwater management infrastructure on the property today?
There's no stormwater management. The water just tends to sheet flow to wherever the lowest points are on the adjoining lots or onto Route 78. So again, there's no stormwater being provided on the site today.
Okay, and then there are some existing nonconformities as to front yard setback as well as side yard setback as well that don't conform to current standards, correct?
Correct. In terms of front yard setback, as it relates to the Victory Road frontage, it's within a foot of being compliant, but if you look at the rear of the site, if you consider this a through lot, you can see the building that does front along Route 78 goes right up to the property line itself, so that would actually be an existing non-conforming condition. And the side yard, when you look, actually both properties would violate the side yard requirement of 15 feet. I think the minimum that we show here is about 8.5 feet as a minimum existing nonconformity with these sites. So now I'll go to the proposed condition that we're proposing here. Jason, if you could just hold this.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. So Matt, we'll mark this as A2. If you could just identify it for the record.
What I just marked as A2 is a colorized version of the site plan that was previously submitted. This is prepared by Stonefield Engineering Design. The date prepared is December 19th, 2022. What you see here is a couple of items. The top left corner is the aerial image. In the center top is the zoning map. In the bottom left,
Just a second, let me
Yes.
just, did we mark that? Because if
yeah,
it's,
I just marked it A2, sorry.
okay,
Yep.
I missed that. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
And the bottom left is a colorized rendering of the site plan that we're proposing. I would note that what we are showing on the plan includes the building, which is in that orange color, the drive aisles, which is in that darker black color. In addition, we are showing vegetation and grass. The landscaping plan here is not been fully designed because this is a bifurcated application, but shows an example of the type of vegetation and landscaping that we could be using to screen the property from the adjoining lots. Again, that'll obviously be further designed should the board act favorably upon this application. Highlighting a couple items with the proposed development, we're looking to maintain the 3 driveways that exist, that serve the site today, with the exact same movements that exist today. We're proposing a self-storage building, and that's, again, that it's a yellowish color, which is 176,000 square feet. It includes a basement and 5 stories high. I note that the 5th story is set back, is not the entire length of the building. The 5th story is actually approximately 59 feet back from the first floor, or the lower floor. So we have a step back on the 5th floor, keeping it further from the road, from Victory Road. So again, the first 59 feet of the building is just 4 stories, and then on the rear half of the building is where you have that 5th story. We have parking located on the front of the lot, located along Victory Road. That includes 15 parking spaces, including the ADA stall. And then we have 4 loading spaces, which are, I would say, under the structure itself, so that if you are unloading from any type of U-Haul or van or even a car that wants to park in the loading areas, that is obviously protected from the weather so they can have easy access into the building and into the elevators within the building itself.
Matt, just going back to the front yard setback and the building location, you said that the building, the 5th story, is set back 59 feet from the first floor, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but can you talk about the overall setback of the building itself from the property line?
Yes, so the building itself is set back 56.3 feet from the property line. To note, the zone requires 25 feet, so the first floor through the 4th floor are double the required distance for setback, and that 5th floor is 4 times the setback requirement per the zoning ordinance in terms of front yard setback. And that's from the Victory Road right-of-way. In terms of the front yard setback from Route 78, we are compliant with the 25-foot front yard setback. This is a through lot because it has frontages on 2 non-adjacent streets.
Okay, so the 5th story is set back from the property line approximately 110 feet.
Yes, approximately 110 feet, yes.
Okay.
In addition, for the building, we do have a small office space, as was previously mentioned by Mr. Tuvel. These type of operations typically have 1 employee on site during those hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's possible during opening weekends, and as they lease up, they may have 2 people there on Saturdays or busier days as employees. But generally, you have 1 employee on site in that office space. And again, the primary garbage Mr. Tuvel mentioned gets picked up once or twice a week, is generally just kind of lunch and paper goods. Anyone who brings boxes, materials that any of the renters in the building, they basically have to take the garbage out with them. So really the only garbage you have is some, again, light paper goods, lunch, things like that from the office user in the building. I would note also the amount of green that's on the site. As I mentioned, and Mr. Tuvel mentioned, the site currently has 87.5% impervious coverage. We were reducing that to 68.8% impervious coverage, which is compliant with your ordinance, which requires 72%. I would note that that amount of impervious coverage or new green space we're adding equates to about 3 basketball courts of green spaces being added to this site compared to the existing condition. You could see that we are compliant with all of the setbacks, including being about double the setback on the easterly side in terms of the side yard setback from the building to the easterly side property line. So again, we've moved the building all within the required setbacks, and then on the Victory Road frontage and on the easterly frontage of the building, actually more than doubled the allowable setback for this building.
And Matt, just going back to the impervious coverage, should the board look favorably and we come back at some later time with a site plan, would we be subject to, or we'd have to implement more stringent stormwater management controls?
Yes, so this would be considered a major development by the DEP and the township because of the amount of disturbance on the property. I would note what we would intend to do for this type of application. We are already reducing the amount of runoff because we are increasing the amount of pervious coverage, but we would likely collect the runoff and direct it into the system, the stormwater system within Victory Road. So right now, as I mentioned, and Mr. Tuvell mentioned, rain hits the site today, mainly on parking lots, which is considered a dirty runoff, and then would run either to the adjoining properties or right into the street uncontrolled. We'd be collecting the runoff either through yard inlets in the grass, through roof leaders on the building, and then connecting it directly into the Victory Road front system and connecting it in that way so that it's more controlled runoff and is less runoff than what you currently have today. So we see that as an improvement from a stormwater standpoint. Obviously, that would be fully designed as part of an overall site plan application. Getting into parking, Mr. Tuvell, unless you have any other
Yeah,
site plan
the only other
questions?
operational item, I think it was in the board engineer's letter, was just to confirm that no manager would reside on site. Is that correct? Nobody would be living there, it would just be someone there between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure you hit that during testimony. So, you can go to parking and traffic as well.
Yeah, so getting into parking and traffic. As a traffic engineer, self-storage buildings are either the least or second least amount of trip generation per square foot out of any land use that we deal with. A data center may be the only one that would be more square feet with less trips. Self-storage, again, large amount of square footage, and you'll hear our justifications for it shortly in terms of floor area ratio. But this is a site that generates very little trips per square foot. In fact, the ITE, which is the source that traffic engineers like myself utilize to project traffic projections, for a site like this of this size would expect no more than 30 trips during the busiest hours, even on a Saturday. Now, 30 trips could be 15 customers going and 15 customers leaving would consist of 30 trips. So that could be 15 customers in an hour. I would note that our office recently performed counts on the existing self-storage building on Route 22, this most recent Friday and Saturday. And during the 6 hours that we did counts there, which included 2 hours in the morning on Friday, 2 hours in the evening on Friday, and 2 hours on Saturday, middle of the day, we saw a total of 20 total trips in those 6 hours. So about 3 trips an hour, with the Saturday being on the higher end, the weekday morning on the lower end. But again, generally, we're seeing operating sites within the township that are, I'd say, mature sites that have been open for a while, seeing very, very low trip generation at, in the factor of 20 vehicles being generated either in or out over 6 hours of time. Comparing that to other permitted uses, again, this is a industrial zone, a general industrial zone. An office of a permitted square footage on this building would likely bring anywhere between 90 to 100 trips in an hour. And those trips would likely be occurring during these busy rush hour time periods when everyone's going to work or leaving work. So when you're talking about a factor of 3 times less trips from this development than a permitted office building. Also permitted would be daycare facilities of your typical learning experience, Primrose, those type of developments generate somewhere around 100 to 120 trips during the morning and evening pickup hours. Again, this is 30 trips during your busiest hours. Similarly, medical office building or R&D type office buildings would again generate traffic that would be anywhere between double to 4 times the amount of traffic of a self-storage building. Should it be constructed here? So this use, and you'll hear from our planner, while not explicitly permitted within the zone, we believe, from a traffic perspective, is a clear benefit as it generates significantly less traffic than some of those other permitted uses.
So again, just from your report that you submitted to the board dated August 9th, 2022, based on the square footage being proposed, how many trips in the morning peak hour? How many in, or how many out?
In the morning peak hour would be 16 trips. That includes in and out. Evening peak hour would be 26 trips. That includes in and out. And on Saturday, busiest hour would be 30 trips. That includes in and out. Again, I would note when we counted the site that is currently existing on Route 22, we saw significantly less traffic in terms of the amount of traffic going in and out of a operating site within the township than what the ITE projections state.
Okay.
Just in terms of characteristics for self-storage buildings, based on market research and talking to a lot of operators, typically about 50% of their customers go to their sites every month or less frequent. So these are not sites that people tend to visit every day, every week. Obviously, there may be some users that do that, but 50% of their rented units are touched once a month or less frequent than that. So again, that leads into that very low turnover, very low traffic generation and traffic disturbance. When it comes to parking, your ordinance looks at this similar to, I'd say, a warehouse type building where it would be a destination of employment where you'd have a lot of workers working within the building. In fact, I believe your ordinance does require one parking space per every 1,000 square feet, which again is more in line with warehouse development that you would typically see along the Jersey Turnpike, that type of warehouse use. The Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual, which is the source that we use again to project trips and parking generation, typically looks at one parking space being needed for every 10,000 square feet. So for a building such as this, you would expect there to be a need for 18 parking spaces. We are providing 15 standard stalls, the 4 loading spaces, so we have 19 spaces for passenger cars or U-Hauls to utilize these sites. I would note that this site has been designed for your typical, I would say, larger U-Haul vehicle, but not for tractor trailers. Tractor trailers do not utilize buildings like this. In fact, when we were observing the Metro self-storage on Route 22, we did not see any tractor trailers access the site when we were out there. In fact, again, they're typically told not to utilize sites like this. They use different kind of warehouse facilities for tractor trailer use. These are, U-Hauls or smaller, usually personal vehicles, maybe some work vans, some plumbers, may utilize these facilities to store some of their goods. But again, the design vehicle for these type of facilities is not a tractor trailer.
And the reason we used warehouse was just because self-storage did not have a specific criteria in the ordinance for parking because it's not permitted. So conservatively, we just chose something that was the most, I would say, analogous, correct?
Yes, and I would note that when we were at the Metro self-storage on Route 22, we did notice on the Saturday there were 4 cars parked at the maximum when we were out there doing our study. And again, that was this most recent Saturday. Having worked on dozens of self-storage buildings, I typically never see any more between the 9 or 10 parked cars on a site at any one time, even during those busy, I'd say, Saturday, first of the month type time periods.
What's your opinion, staying on the loading for a second, on these on-site circulation?
For the loading?
Yes.
Yes, so we do provide those 4 loading spaces that are located in the center of the building. As I mentioned earlier, they are under structure, so those are the most desirable loading spaces to unload anything that, if there is rain, you have easy access into the building. And again, as you will see, and as the site design gets further perfected, there'll be elevators inside the building that you'd be able to access through a key fob, and at that point, you'd be able to take it right up to your unit inside the building.
So in your opinion, just going back to the parking, the appropriate ratio for this type of use should be what?
1 per 10,000 square feet.
And if that were the case here, what would the demand be?
It'll be 18 parking spaces.
Where 19 are proposed?
Correct, the 15 plus the 4.
Right, the 15 plus the 4 loadings, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So overall, again, from a traffic perspective, I think this is a benefit in being a low traffic user. I think that we have the appropriate amount of parking for this site. And I believe the access points have been designed appropriately. We are reutilizing the access points that exist today. And We believe that they actually work well for this type of use, and we've designed the site so that U-Haul type moving vehicles can utilize the loading areas effectively.
And Mac, if you could just speak to pedestrian circulation, there are sidewalks being proposed in front of the building?
Yes, there's obviously sidewalk that exists along the site frontage, and then there are sidewalks that are proposed along the building. So if you are unloading anything, if you back your vehicle up to the curb, you'd have the sidewalk to be able to wheel anything in, or you could obviously, again, use the larger loading stalls, back your vehicle in and load right into the area where the elevators are.
Okay, and since the U-Haul vehicles can access the site for loading, can a refuse vehicle or recycling vehicle also access the site?
Yes, any private hauler trash vehicle will be able to utilize this site.
Okay. We're not at the site plan stage yet, but if we were to get to that point, the lighting on the site would be full LED type fixtures, is that correct?
Yep, LED fixtures with any type of house side shields or cutoffs. The benefit of LED lights is that you could dim them, direct them, and help prevent any type of light spillage beyond the property lines so that we could be compliant with the ordinance.
All right. Madam Chair, I think that's all I have on direct for Mr. Seckler with respect to civil and traffic. We're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the board.
Confirming, 15 parking spots, correct?
15 parking spots and the 4 loading spots for a total of 19.
Typically, loading is not parking, or?
In this case,
I don't understand the distinction. That's
so
why I'm asking.
yeah, so typically, if you were, let's say, a convenience store, loading is being utilized by a truck that's a third-party truck coming to the site to unload
Sure.
a good. These loading spaces are for customers, just like parking spaces are for customers. So these loading spaces in the building, a passenger car can use, a larger, a U-Haul could use. So I would actually say in a self-storage building, outside of the employee parking stall, they're really all loading spaces. They're just various sizes because people are loading their goods in and out of the building. That's the function of the use here.
Okay.
And again, the employee is the only one who's really parking. The rest
Yep.
of them are just unloading or loading.
Any other questions?
I have a couple.
Yep.
First one, you're proposing to leave all 3 of those driveways there?
Yes.
Okay, this isn't an attack question, this is a question though. Have you been out to that site and tried to pull in that front driveway?
By front, you mean the one closest on the corner?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's an island that you're merging into. There is no way a U-Haul will make that turn.
Yeah, and
There is not a chance.
that's one of the reasons why the U-Hauls, they would like to utilize the very wide driveway that's located, I'd say, center to the site. That would be the easiest one for a U-Haul to use. But passenger cars,
Even a
That
passenger
one-
car, because I've been in and out of that driveway, and you're taking your life in your hands in that front driveway. I'm telling you now,
are you referring to exiting the driveway or entering?
entering
Okay.
that driveway.
Okay.
It's an entrance.
Yeah, it's
only.
entrance only. That's what I said.
It's
You're definitely
entrance-
taking your life in your hands if
it's
you're going out.
entrance only
If
on
someone
that
coming out.
driveway.
Yeah, now, I would state that we did file with the Department of Transportation. They actually have jurisdiction over the leftmost driveway, and the center driveway falls within their jurisdiction. So we filed for what's considered a letter of no interest to allow us to continue the use of those driveways with the change of this building. We're waiting to hear back from them in terms of.
Yeah, because if anything, that's an exit, that would be better as an exit driveway.
Yeah, as a letter of no
Yeah.
interest, we can't change the driveways.
Until they answer.
Until they answer, so.
Okay. The only other clarification, I wasn't sure, I may misheard. Okay. The hours were from 6 to 10?
6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Right, but the manager, there'd only be somebody on site until 6 or 8, did you say? So-
Correct. So the way that it works is that every customer has a key fob, so that management can identify who comes in and when they come in. You have a personalized one. So the management would be there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., but if somebody needed to get there earlier, to get something or put something away, they could do that, or if somebody wanted to come a little bit later, they could do that. But there's full security on the site, and they monitor and they know who comes in and who comes out.
But obviously, sales, if you want to rent a unit.
Yes, correct.
That would only be
Yeah.
during the time period when
Yeah.
someone's on site.
That's correct.
I would also note that based on what we've heard from recent operators, about 50% of sales of units are actually done online and not actually at the site. So you'll reserve your thing, then you'll show up at the building, get your
Yeah, I was
key
just
fob.
thinking more from security. If
Yeah.
there's nobody there for the 2 hours at night, that's probably the most dangerous time of the night that somebody's
Yeah.
not working the facility.
And again, they have full cameras outside the site and inside the building, so they know every hallway in there who's tracking in. And again, you need a key fob to even get through the door.
Thank you.
You might have said this, but do you anticipate any sales out of the office, like boxes?
Yeah, yeah, sorry if we weren't clear about that. Yeah, the only things that would be sold out of there would be like tape or a box or something that you might need in that regard. That relate to the storage facility itself.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, our professionals.
I had a question in my memo related to a site plan note that was included on the land use and zoning table. There's an asterisk next to building height, which indicated that building height it gives the definition of building height and it says TBD FA, which I'm assuming the height is not yet firmly solidified there. Can you just confirm that the 55-foot height is the height being requested?
Yeah, 55 feet is what's being requested. The reason why we had originally listed a TBD is that we didn't have a fully designed grading plan to establish a, I'd say a datum to measure the height off of, but based on what we've since done in terms of preliminary grading, we feel comfortable that 55 feet would be the maximum height for this building based on your zoning ordinance.
And Mr. Disco's letter had included a question about that the architectural elevations showed that the 55 feet was measured to the flat part of the roof, but that the ridge line was actually not included on some of the other architectural features. So I didn't know if maybe that's a question for you or maybe the architect.
I think I would defer to the architect about that aspect.
As far as, I know you gave some observed trip counts from the facility on Route 22. Can you give some of the board the benefit of the specifics of that site as it compares to what's being proposed here?
Yeah, I believe that site is slightly smaller. I believe that site is 120, let's say 125, 126,000 square feet. So it's a little bit smaller and obviously likely, I haven't seen, or I don't believe we have a finalized unit layout in this building, but obviously it would likely have, less units by that same fraction amount. So again, this site, all things being considered, may be a little bit higher trip generator based on that same, same percentage difference. But the IT numbers that I gave earlier, that is based on the square footage of this building. So at 176,000 square feet, the IT would project, again, 16 morning trips, 26 evening trips, 30 Saturday trips, which, again, I'm opining that's probably high. I think the industry has seen a little bit less turnover in this type of use compared to some of the data from that IT could be 20 years old at this point.
Yeah, but Matt, just on that question, if you use the ratio that you counted at the other site on 22 and added the square footage that you have here that we're proposing, would it be less or would it be greater or less than ITE?
It would still be less than IT. Again, I'm off the top of my head, I don't have the percentage, but I imagine even if this was 30 trips over 6 hours, that's obviously less than the 30 trips over 1 hour than the IT would said this would have on a Saturday.
Okay, I think that's just helpful for the board to know.
No, thank you.
Yes.
Have you, I know you indicated that most of the vehicles that will be coming in will be like U-Haul size or passenger vehicles. Oftentimes, especially looking at the layout, there's 10 by 30 units, there's 10 by 20 units. That's a one-bedroom, two-bedroom apartment in most cases that a mover would bring a full-size truck for.
Yeah.
They wouldn't bring anything less than that, just in case you had actually filled up the whole cubic volume. And so, has the truck turning template, been, or a truck turning exhibit been put together to better understand, I think especially with the driveway access and potential issues with even just the U-Haul, 15-foot truck, what that would look like?
Yeah, so two things with that. One is typically if you are using, I would say, a tractor trailer type moving company, They usually, if you want to store stuff, they actually provide the storage. It's one of the things that they, you know.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
It's not necessarily true. You can hire any moving company and they'll come to any self-storage facility.
Understand. Usually they try to sell that they could store it, type of thing. But if you go on the U-Haul website and they, measure out what size truck do you need, the 1 to 2 bedroom apartment one usually ends up being about a 24-foot U-Haul vehicle, which we've designed the site turning templates for that style vehicle. Again, I don't believe that we have any issue, even if we had to sign, no truck access to that first entrance driveway that I think one of the board members had concern about access to. We did do some truck turns, and again, I'd be happy to provide, I don't know if it's for this or for the full site plan, to show that, again, our design vehicles would have that. It's possible, whether it's this end user on the website shows, if you want to buy a lease online, no tractor trailer, deliveries available or something like that. I think that's something that can be provided from the end user perspective on a site like this.
Okay. And then I just wanted to confirm at this stage, there's no proposal for like a U-Haul truck leasing where they'll.
No, there's no.
Site and come up.
Yeah, so I should have said that. You're right. Thank you. There's no outdoor storage and there's no vehicular storage on the property. So, yeah, other facilities where you might see trucks being stored or something, or outdoor storage, there's no outdoor storage proposed.
And beyond that, not like tenants being able to store their boat with RV.
Correct.
No leasing, no moving truck.
Yeah, yes, yes, and yes. Yes.
I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
I would agree with Mr. Seckler that it's a through lot. One of my comments was that on the site plan, it's identified as a rear yard, and the verbiage on the plan has 25-foot rear yard, and it would be a 50-foot rear yard. But if you consider it a front yard as a through lot, even though there's no access to Route 78, by definition, it is adjacent to a street. So from that standpoint, it's two front yards, and the rest are side yards. In terms of the traffic, my experience, and I've got 3 of these in Mountain Side, it's a very low traffic generating use. And I wouldn't argue with the ITE or the trip counts that they did. I had in the table I gave you, the Metro, the Springfield one is 573 units. This one I counted as 1408, so almost 3 times as many units. So I think the trips probably, if you have units, you've got individual owners on the units, probably drives the trips more than the square footage, because you could have a 5x5 unit or a 5x10 or a 5x20. But I don't think it's worth arguing over, because again, it's a very low parking ratio, and the 18 spaces, and again, the site plan shows it as 15 parking spaces and the 4 loading spaces. Traditionally, for a building this size, you would need 4 loading spaces, and they aren't typically counted together. I think Mr. Seckler's response on that was worthy of consideration for the use. It's not that you have deliveries to the site that you need truck loading zones, so it's just going to be larger vehicles there. The building could always be converted in the future, and that would be a different story, but we're not at that point yet. So, most of my comments, I think, were generated from the height and the floor area ratio, so that's probably going to be the architect.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions from anyone on the board, I'm gonna open it up to the public to see if there's anyone present that has any questions for this witness with respect to the testimony that he has given. There are none. Thank you very much. Mr. Seckler?
Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you. So the next witness I'd like to call is Louis Vandeloo. He's the project architect.
Do you have your exhibits up there?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll swear you in first. Go ahead.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your full name, spell your last name, give us your business address.
Louis Vandeloot, Vandeloecht, 229 Greenbrier Estates, St. Louis, Missouri, 63122.
Thank you. And just as the engineer did, if you show any exhibits that were not submitted with the application, we need to mark those as exhibits tonight.
I believe everything we had was submitted with the application, so.
Thank you.
Louis, if you could just give the board the benefit of your educational background as an architect, your years practicing, and whether your license you're licensed in the state of New Jersey, and if your license is current and good standing.
Yes, graduated with a Bachelor of Architecture from Drury University in Springfield, Missouri in 1996. Practicing as a licensed architect since 2004. Currently licensed in New Jersey as an architect, I believe 2012 or 13.
Okay, and approximately how many self-storage facilities have you worked on over the years?
In New Jersey itself, probably 15 to 20.
Okay, great. All right, why don't we start with would the board accept Mr. Vanderloot as an expert? Sorry, I went too quick there, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Any members have any objections to qualifying Mr. Vanderloot as an expert in architecture?
No objection.
Excellent, thanks.
As we say, my bad. So, Mr. Vanderloot, if you could just get the board started with a description of the elevations that are being proposed. And as council indicated, if it's a colorized exhibit or something that's is using for demonstrative purposes, we have to mark it.
And I apologize, I'm coming off cold, so if somebody can't hear or breaks up, please let me know. The sheet here, it's sheet A 2.0, dated 8/18/2022. This was part of our submission pack. Do you want to go ahead and mark it?
No, if it wasn't changed, you don't have to. It's okay.
No, okay. So what you're seeing here is the south elevation. This is the main elevation that fronts, Victory Springfield. What you're seeing here, it's at this location here, the kind of that was mentioned, the lower 4-story piece, and then the higher 4-story piece in the back. What we have here and what we try to do is kind of take some of the materials we saw in the neighborhood. So you're seeing a mix of brick, siding. We did some peak roofs as we've seen in some of the residentials around. Again, kind of make it blend into the neighborhood a little bit. We use the windows, what you're seeing there for windows. The office location is located right there just to the side. The loading bays are where these garage doors or large doors are. And then the windows you're seeing are what we call display windows. Usually they're falsified windows, so if you look through those, you may see the self-storage doors, false doors looking between them. You guys have probably seen them on some other self-storage facilities. Kind of let everybody see what goes in there. Part of that is just for display purposes. Part of it is also just to bring interest to the elevation. What we try to do here is obviously break the elevation up with some vertical elements, with the glazing, with the peaked roofs and kind of some of the pitched roofs that we had, and then setting a nice solid base with the brick at the bottom and then doing the siding from that point up.
Could you just speak to the setback of the top story as Mr. Sekler did, but could you just speak to it from an architectural perspective?
Certainly, I'm actually going to change sheets here.
Go ahead. Just refer to the sheet number list.
Yep. So the sheet A 2.1 with the same date of 8/18/22. The top elevation probably here shows it best. This is the west elevation, so looking at it from the side, we can really see where that 4 stories comes across the 59 feet and then steps up to the back and then continues to the back half of the site. Again, we tried to introduce some elements along that elevation to kind of break it up and provide kind of really a solid corner for that to have, but then also take advantage of the fact that we are stepping the building back.
All right, and can you just continue and describe the other elevations that are part of the packet?
Certainly. So the bottom piece you're seeing is the northwest elevation. Same kind of concept that we had before, where you have mix of glass, at the corners for those display windows, brick base, and then siding, from that point. And then at the very top, we introduced a cornice band to kind of give the top some interest and a nice top to the building.
Okay. And none of the HVAC equipment or no mechanical equipment will be visible from the right-of-way, or any of the surrounding properties?
No, it will not be.
Okay, they're fully screened?
They need to be, yes.
Okay. Can you also speak to some energy-efficient aspects of the building that might be incorporated in your design?
We're going to have what we typically do in a self-storage building. You have a white roof on it, so highly reflective roof. We'll have all the required insulation values for the building per the energy code, and then these buildings are usually very minimally heated and cooled, so we'll meet code requirements for those.
Okay. And while we're on the elevations, can you just speak to I think it was the planner or the engineer's question regarding just the building height measurement, just what the highest point is on the building?
Certainly. Probably the best one to look at is that west elevation. The front elevation, we're sitting at 43 foot 10 inches, and that's to the top of the parapet. It's a flat roof for drainage, so we've gone the top of parapet at this point, knowing that our roof will be slightly below that as we get drainage into the building and around the building. On the back of the building, from the setback back, we're at 55 feet to that same top of parapet location. I know the question was brought up about some additional peaks that were showing up. The ones that referred to are these ones here in the front, in the corners, and there's one again in the front. Those are, I will call it false facades, if anything else. The roof behind it, the parapet comes up to the same parapet height. Those are there just for architectural fenestration. They're not enclosing any additional space, or there's no raising of the roof at those locations. They're purely for, aesthetic purposes to kind of break the facade up.
Right, so along the front of the building, the height of the elevation is 43 feet 10 inches, is what you're saying?
Correct.
And then that's set back for about 59 feet?
Is 4310, and then once it gets to that point, you step up to 55 foot elevation.
Okay. All right, can you run the board through the floor plans, please?
Yep. Okay, let me actually start here.
Just refer to the sheet so the board knows where you're at.
Yep, I got it. So this is sheet A 1.1, dated 7/27 of 22. This was submitted as part of the package. What you're seeing here is the first floor plan or ground level plan. The reason I wanted to start here was you see the 4 loading docks. They're located right there in the center of the building that line up with what was on the civil plan. And then right next to that is the office space with a small bathroom, small little storage closet for the office, used little break room for the office folk to use and where people come. Electrical fire rooms there on the front of the building, pair of elevators, and then the required egress stairs.
All right, can you just speak to fire suppression?
Yes, the building will be fully sprinkled.
Okay. All right, and what about ADA accessibility?
Complete ADA accessibility is required by state code and accessibility.
All right, can you go through the rest of the floors? If that's
Certainly.
okay. That was the first floor plan, correct?
Correct. So A 1.0 is the basement plan, dated the 7/27/22 date. Obviously, stairs and elevators all stack and go all the way through the building. The notch you're seeing there at the bottom is the loading bay that's above it. That's just, we don't put anything under that bay, so that's just a notch out in the building there. Second floor plan, A 1.2, same date, mimics of the first floor, as we did notch out for the loading area. And then A 1.4 is actually the fourth floor. That and the third floor both match. One thing I would note is they're in the top point of the kind of the 2 points of the home plate, to reference back to what the civil engineer said. And then down here in the lower corner are those display windows I discussed, where somebody can get back there. They're not accessed by anybody except just for cleaning purposes and changing light bulbs. And then the fifth floor, A 1.5, same 7/27 date, shows the step back in the roof, and then the same elevators and stairs. So everything stacks at that point.
Can you just describe the range and the size of the units so the board is aware of what's being proposed?
Correct. I mean, this is what we probably typically see in a self-storage facility. It ranges anywhere from a 5x5 unit to a 10x15, 10x20, 10x30. Usually there's a lot more, the smaller units and the bigger units. It'll shift slightly as we finalize the plans based on the final end user and what their mix wants to be with the market study, but you're in that typical range.
Okay. I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions that the board planner or engineer had in their letter that we might want to just touch on. We touched on the height. So you're comfortable with the 55-foot height request as the board planner indicated as what our maximum height is?
Correct.
Okay. One thing that we probably should have stated earlier. I don't believe that we're subject to the EV charging station requirements because we're under 25 spaces. But if the board wanted it to make them, you know, EV ready with the conduit there, the client would have no issue with that, if that's something that the board felt was appropriate. I don't believe I have anything further for the architect, but we're happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Is it based on the amount of spaces that are provided or based on the amount of spaces that are required? Okay, so I think there should be a condition.
Yeah, it makes sense to do it. That's why I offered it. It's the right thing to do, and it's probably the way that the future's going anyway.
Okay, so let's note that for if it proceeds. Okay, sorry.
That's all I have for direct. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All right, members of the board, do you have any questions for this witness?
Emergency exits, where would they be at?
Right now, I'm just going to refer to sheet A 1.0. They'd be located here in the two corners, off on each side. So kind of on the, call it the westerly edge and easterly side, about 70 feet back.
On 1.0, you said?
Yes.
Okay, and two stairwells for this footprint is adequate?
It meets code, yes, it does.
Seeing that you're at one of the furthest points, it seems like an awfully long trek if there should be an emergency situation to make it to a staircase.
It's agreed, but we meet travel distance.
There might have been a better location point for stair access.
Yeah, and we're happy to, if the application should proceed, to make sure that the fire official doesn't have any comments, or if they do, we're happy to address them.
Yeah, I think that would be prudent.
Understood.
Any other questions from our board members?
For that matter, where does a fire truck park, assuming that the loading and unloading is filled?
Okay, I think that's a better question for Mr. Seckler. Would it be okay, Madam Chair, if I brought him up to answer that?
Yes, please do.
Thanks. So I think it's more of a site plan question.
Again, Matthew Seckler for the record.
You're still licensed?
Still licensed and under oath. Typically, again, I'm not a fire official, but typically you wouldn't go under the building, which is where those loading spaces are if there is a fire. So again, and I don't believe we received any formal comments back from the fire department, but I imagine either the fire truck would sit horizontal, like within the parking drive field, or from Victory Road and fight the fire from that location. But again,
Saying you would imagine, do you know?
well, I know that a fire truck would not utilize the loading spaces if the building was on fire, because they wouldn't want to be in the fall zone of the building. Whether the fire truck would utilize the drive aisle or Victory Road to fight the fire, one or the other, that I would have to defer to someone, who fights fires for a living.
Yeah, and again, as the architect indicated, the building has a full fire suppression system, but if we come back for a site plan, we have no issue as a condition of a use variance, meeting with the fire official and ensuring that they don't have any comments, or if they do, we've satisfied them. Happy to do that. It's the right thing to do.
While we're on fire, the fire official was not communicated with at all based on building height or the setbacks provided if they're adequate?
I don't know if the plans were circulated to that person, but again, we're happy to meet with them if that's what the board would like.
So I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions while we're on fire for Mr. Seckler? Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the architect from the board? Okay, I'm gonna turn it to our professionals.
So I believe the definition in the land use ordinance does make the building account for even those architectural parapets in the corner. So it would be great if we could get the information about how high those are. It not indicate on the plan, it's hard to tell if it's 5 feet, 6 feet, I don't know. Do you have that information?
We can provide that.
Thank you. And, you know, alternatively, there could be a redesign that brings those down, either with the roof pitch or just if they are simply, you know, part of the facade and not actually part of like the building use, you could just bring them down to the 55-foot level, even with the flat roof. But, you know, either. I think that's all I have for that.
Thank you. Mr. Prisco.
The metro that was referred to was 2014, so I don't know if there was any members of this board that were on the board at that time. But that's a two-story building, and it conforms to the height, which in the C zone is also 40 feet. So I think they have to be very strong on their planning testimony as to why the height exceeds. It's probably going to be closer to 60 feet as opposed to the 40 feet in the stores.
It's a
I agree with the fall zone stuff. They would not park adjacent to the building, and certainly not under the loading area. And I don't think that should be an impediment to your review. Whether the fire department would want some access around, there's nobody living in the building, so again, they typically don't want to be adjacent to a building that could fall on vehicle traffic.
Mr. Disco, as a point of information, do you know whether the fire department's ladders are sufficient for the proposed height?
I don't know the answer to that.
Has the fire department been consulted at all?
On all applications, Jen sends it to the police, fire, and other people to help. You know, if it's a restaurant, very often we just don't get comments. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah, no,
you know, they're
I
not
get it.
interested.
I get it.
It's
I
just
get it.
They deal with it when it's a real world issue.
We can be more, assertive and work with your professionals to reach out to them just to ensure.
I think I think it's an issue of concern on the board, so I think maybe a proactivity would be nice.
I agree. Okay, that's fine.
I think that would be recommended.
Okay.
That's everything you have? Okay. If there's no further questions from the board, I'm just going to open it up to the public. Are there any members of the public that have any questions for the witness? None. Okay, great. We can move on to your,
Madam Chair, would it be okay if we took like a 5-minute break? Would that be okay?
yeah, we can do that. Let's go off the record. It's 7:25.
Great, thank you.
26.
You love it when a planner is exacting. No, that's what we need.
Okay, great. All right, so we are back on the record. It's 7:37, and yes.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So the next witness I'd like to call is our professional planner, Elizabeth McManus from Kyle McManus. So, counsel, I guess we should swear her in.
Yes, thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Please state your full name, spell your last name, and give us your business address.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth McManus. That's McManus. I'm principal at Kyle McManus Associates, and we're located at 2 East Broad Street in Hopewell, New Jersey.
Thank you.
All right, so Beth, if you can go through your professional qualifications for the board, educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying before similar boards in the state of New Jersey.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So first and foremost, I'm a licensed planner. I hold my New Jersey professional planning license. I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Both those licenses remain in good standing today. I have an undergraduate degree from Rutgers University in environmental policy, institutions, and behavior. Also a graduate degree from Rutgers in city and regional planning. And I've been practicing here in New Jersey in land use planning specifically, oftentimes for municipalities since 2001. But I do quite a bit of private work as well. And I've been qualified in approximately 30 towns, although I don't believe this municipality, but other places, including but certainly not limited to places like Princeton, Long Hill, Mount Laurel, Kingwood Township, Manahawkin, Powell, Alexandria, Raritan Township, and several other places.
All right, would the board accept Ms. McManus as an expert in the field of professional planning?
Yes.
No objection, as long as she turns her mic on, please. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. No, and one thing before we get started with her testimony is I did speak with your planner on the issue about the height and the one aesthetic element being taller. We will adjust that to be 55 feet, so there's no question that the request is for 55 feet and no more. We'll make that adjustment on the plan. So I just wanted to put that on the record. So Beth, in preparation of this application, you reviewed all the application materials, plans, and reports that were submitted?
Yes.
And you reviewed the board's professional reports?
Yes.
And you visited the site and the surrounding area?
Yes.
All right, and you've also reviewed the relevant sections of the land use ordinance as well as the master plan for the municipality?
Yes.
And you've listened to all the testimony that's set forth today?
Yes.
All right, can you start maybe with a brief site description and the proposal, but from a planning perspective, no need to reiterate other testimony that's been given?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Our property, just in terms of basics, we're about 1.5 acres, and we're located in your I-20 district. This is one of your industrial zones, and it permits things or uses such as research and development, also non-nuisance manufacturing, fabrication, assembly uses, also offices, and childcare facilities, as well as municipal uses as well. We are actually surrounded by a mix of uses. While we are within your I-20 district, we are surrounded by the I-20 district, but we actually have a variety of uses and sensitive uses that are proximate or abutting the site. So as you can see from Exhibit A2 behind me, you can see the zoning map on that. And what you really can't get a sense from the zoning map, but you can start to see from the aerial photograph, is that we actually have residential uses located across and sort of catty-corner to the property. They are located across Victory Road on Block 303, Lot 1.01, as well as Lot 1. That's an existing residential development. We also have another residential development not too far from us, located to the southwest or so of the property. And I think that creates a bit of a unique situation here, because even though we are, as I said at the outset, surrounded by industrial zoning, we actually have some of these sensitive land uses that impact, I think, what makes sense for development of this property. Our immediate surrounding uses, I will say, in terms of abutting our property lines, are non-residential uses, and of course, we have Route 78 to the rear. Our proposal, as you heard today, is simply a self-storage facility. We do require quite a few variances, and I think that's why I specifically am here. And if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the D1, the use variance, to permit the self-storage use in your industrial district. Okay. So as the board probably knows, I'm sure you've been through quite a bit of these, our D1 variance, just like every variance that comes before you, has certain criteria that need to be met, the positive criteria and the negative criteria. The positive criteria simply asks, what about this use is, really makes sense for the property? How is this property particularly suited to the proposed use? Are there other purposes of the municipal land use law that are supportive? And I think there are several reasons why we can satisfy that positive criteria. But let's start with the particular suitability of the use. And so this site is really in a unique location in the township and also here within your I-20 district. So as I said at some of my opening remarks, we are unique in your I-20 district because rather than being in a wholly industrial character of an area, we have residential uses located across the street and also a little further to the south of us. And that creates an opportunity here for a transitional use that both complements the character of the industrial zoning and also the character of the residential development that's located proximate to the site. And I think that we have a really unique opportunity here to assign a use that is able to complement both of those items, the character of the zone as well as the character of the surrounding land uses. Additionally, I just want to note, as part of having some of these sensitive land uses proximate to our site, those residential land uses, it also puts, I think, a greater emphasis on the type of activity on our property. And that's part of what makes our use so well suited for this particular location. We have those residential uses proximate to the site, and so we want to ensure that we have limited traffic coming in and out of our property, both in terms of passenger vehicles for perhaps employees, but also in terms of truck traffic, making sure that we have a site that can produce a limited impact, or a use rather that can produce a limited impact. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that in terms of the entire township, we're located in a unique area of Springfield where we are located in the northeast corner of the township. And so this use, although I think it is complementary to what we have in the area, the reality is it's going to have very limited impact on the character of the township of a whole or a function of the township as a whole. But in addition to that, our site itself has unique shape and frontage that also lends itself to our proposed use. So as you can see from, that was area A2, we have a unique shape. We're sort of a trapezoidal shape, if you will. And I think that's relevant for this criteria because this odd or awkward shape can make it difficult for a site to be able to properly utilize the property without creating or resulting in areas of the site that really can't be utilized because they're irregularly shaped. But here, our use can really accommodate or account for that. It's well suited for this awkward shape in the sense that we don't require substantial parking. One of the variances I'll be addressing, and one of the things we've already heard, is we have just 15 parking spaces plus another 4 loading spaces on the site, and that's helpful for being able to really use this awkwardly shaped site in an efficient way because you don't have these typically rectangular or perhaps square parking fields that are necessary. We can really make do with a very minimal number of parking spaces. And so for these reasons, the location, the surrounding land uses, and the site shape really, I think, contribute to the fact that our site is particularly suited for the self-storage use that we're proposing here tonight. But in addition to that, there are also a handful of purposes of the municipal land use law that our application supports. The first one is Purpose A, and this is promotion of the general welfare. Simply having a use that is, having a site that is particularly suited to the proposed use advances the general welfare. But in addition to that, I think we also support Purpose G of the municipal land use law, which is to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including commercial and industrial, both public and private, according to their respective environmental requirements to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. And I've cited this purpose because the use having a use that is so well suited to both the industrial character, the industrial non-residential uses that surround the site, as well as the residential uses sort of across the street or catty corner to the property, is a unique circumstance, and us being able to create a space that actually complements these two diverging land uses is beneficial to the municipality and, as I said, supportive of this purpose of the municipal land use law. But in addition to that, in terms of meeting those environmental requirements for the needs of all New Jersey citizens, I want to emphasize once again that our site proposal is actually reducing the impervious cover. So we're reducing the impervious cover on the property, not only from simply the positive of an environmental or a stormwater management standpoint, but also down to below that which is a requirement in the municipality, so eliminating a nonconformity. And then in addition, I think it's important that our use, not only does it complement some of these surrounding uses, but also complements some of the development that we see in the larger area, whether it's Springfield or Springfield plus the surrounding municipalities. So we see a lot of multifamily housing, specifically inclusionary development, being either existing in the area through across the street at the Cove development, just as the nearby example, but also in surrounding areas, perhaps in Springfield, but certainly in the township of Millburn to the north, and I'm sure to some of your other municipal neighbors. This increase in multifamily housing that we see in the region, it just simply supports the need for additional services typically used by those in smaller housing units, such as self-storage units. And so I think that also contributes to us satisfying or supporting this purpose of the municipal land use law. And then the last, not the last, but an additional purpose is Purpose H, which is to encourage the location and design of transportation routes to promote the free flow of traffic. And I cite this because we have a very low intensity use, particularly from the aspect of parking. We heard from Mr. Seckler that our highest peak is on Saturdays with a total of 30 trips during peak hour. We also have 26 trips during weekday PM peak or 16 trips during weekday PM peak. So this is a very low intensity use. And I think that's noteworthy, not only just by virtue of our proposal, but also as you might compare it to some of the other permitted uses in the district. We think about office, for example, that's a very dramatic difference. It's a permitted use in the district, and that would create calculated 86 trips during the weekday morning or 71 during the weekday evening. And even research and development would yield additional trips at 53 or 40 for the AM or weekday AM and PM peaks respectively. And so we're able to create a use on this property with much less traffic and site intensity than what else is permitted in the district. We're also supporting Purpose I, which is promotion of a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques. And I cite that because we're proposing a building that, let's be honest, it looks far better than that which exists today. We have an older industrial building on the site that's really just unsightly as you drive past the property on Victory. For those of you that may have noticed the property from Route 78, it's a similar condition as well. And so this is an opportunity to just simply eliminate those unsightly conditions and replace the property, or replace them with a nice-looking building with additional green space on the property. As I said before, actually a reduction in the impervious cover from 87.5% down to 68.8, 69%, and that's a reduction of over 12,000 square feet. In addition to that, on the appearance of the site, I just want to note that one of the things that we've tried to do is, yes, make the building nice looking, but also to make it complementary to those residential land uses. We wanted to have a building that both fit in with the industrial zoning as well as those residential uses. And then the last purpose that we support is Purpose J, which is to promote the conservation of historic sites, districts, open space, energy resources, valuable natural resources. And I cite this last purpose because, as I said before, we're actually creating more green space on the property, another 12,000 square feet, and a reduction of almost 20%, and importantly, down below the maximum that which is permitted. And so these are the purposes that we also support the municipal land use law. And D1 use variance also requires a negative criteria, substantial detriment to the zone plan or the public good, but I'm actually going to address that at the end of my testimony. So instead of jumping to that, I'm going to move on to the D6 height variance. And so for this variance, the criteria is a bit different. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is first how the site can accommodate the increased building height. So we have a building height, just as a reminder, of yes, it's a maximum of 55, but really importantly, the whole site is not at 55 feet. Instead, we have a building height that is almost conforming of 43 feet 10 inches for the first 59 feet of depth of the building. And then it increases to that 55-foot building height. And so why do municipalities regulate building height? It's really to address the building appearance, perhaps to address views for surrounding properties, and as well to address building intensity and activity. And given all of those considerations, I think that our site is really well suited and can easily accommodate this increased building height. And I say that not only because of the architectural techniques that we've used to try to mitigate the appearance of the building height, but also because of the uniqueness of our particular property. So our property has nearly double the depth that is required in the zone. We have 150 feet is required, but we have a total depth of 284 feet. And that's important because it allows us to push the building back towards our Route 78 frontage, importantly, with a conforming setback. But doing so allows us to be able to provide for the self-storage building, but to be able to do so in a way that with the increased setback so that it mitigates the appearance of the height along the street and as well as from the surrounding uses. Also, I want to note that we're not blocking views of perhaps residences or other uses in the area. One of the things that is interesting is the Cove multifamily building that is located across Victory from us. It's actually the side of the building that most directly faces our property. There are units with balconies facing their parking lot and then facing Victory further to the northeast of our property. So I can't tell you that they won't be able to see our site, but our building is not front and center. It's really, folks would need to sit on their balcony and look left. So I feel very comfortable that we're not going to be blocking views. That said, if we were, we would be blocking view of Route 78 from residents. Additionally, I think that our building height is supported, our proposed building height is supported by the lack of impacts. As I said, building height is often regulated for one reason, because it's a good way to regulate the building height, or excuse me, the building activity and the building intensity. But with self-storage uses, and in particular, the one that we're proposing here, I don't think that's necessary, because as we look at the traffic figures, they are just so much lower, so much less traffic and activity coming on and off this property and compared to even a conforming building size, whether it's an office or a research and development use, for example. And then the last point I want to make about height, about our proposed building height and why it's so well suited for this particular use. As I said, it was, we have a site that's very deep. It allows us to push the building back, but and we've designed the building specifically to mitigate the height. But the other thing that I wanted to note in terms of that height setback is that not only have we created a larger front yard setback of about 56 feet, which is more than double the minimum permitted. What that does is that actually creates a setback of about 110 feet of that 55-foot building height from our road, our Victory Road frontage. But in addition to that, because of the setback of the Cove, because of the road, I just want to note that our building, our 55-foot building height is located nearly 200 feet from the nearest residences. So we're at about 190 feet setback from that building. And so I think we've got a unique building design as well as a unique site and unique surrounding uses that really help to accommodate the building height and ensure that the use or that height is appropriate for this particular property.
So just before we conclude on the D6 and move on, the Grasso versus Borough of Spring Lake Heights, which with 375 NJ Super 41, which is the appellate division case that governs these D6 height variances, you believe that the test set forth in that case regarding whether the site can accommodate the additional height is met based on the reasons that you just gave?
Yeah, absolutely. The site can easily accommodate based on our site design, our building, or excuse me, our site conditions, as well as the surrounding land uses.
Great, thank you.
The next variance I'd like to tackle is the D4, that's our FAR variance. So just as a quick reminder, the maximum permitted in the district is 0.8, and that's a building of just under 54,000 square feet. Our existing is just at 0.5, but we are proposing 2.62 for our building that's about 176,000 square feet. FAR is typically regulated in a community in order to address the building appearance, but also building intensity, site activity, oftentimes as a measurement of, or as related to traffic and trips coming in and out of a property. But similar to what we've talked about already, I think that one of the nice things about our proposal is that we're able to construct a building that has a really quality appearance, has a nice presence on the street, but we're able to do so without having any of those impacts that you might expect from a building of this size. Certainly the traffic, as I've testified and we've heard from Mr. Seckler, is far less than what we would see for even a research and development building, much less an office building on this property. I think it's noteworthy that the shape of our site can also help us accommodate the proposed FAR of 2.62. Again, we've got this trapezoidal building shape, but what that really means for our property is that the western facade of the site is going to have less visibility since it's not perpendicular to the street. So certainly not no visibility, but as it's angled away from Victory Road as opposed to being perpendicular to Victory Road, I think that's going to result in some less visibility of the property. Certainly as some of the additional buildings are potentially redeveloped to achieve their full potential. We have single-story buildings oftentimes along to the west of the site. We've also sought to mitigate the increased building area, the increased FAR through our site design. So we've proposed a building that is really intended to, yes, be nice looking, and we certainly want to create a quality piece of building architecture here, but more importantly for this variance, building design that mitigates that appearance of increased building FAR. So we've done that through adding windows and also adding gables and other architectural ornamentation to really increase the how nice the building looks, as well as to reduce the appearance of building mass and bulk. I think it's also noteworthy in terms of our FAR, although we're far exceeding it, we have an increase in impervious cover, so more green space on the property, and we require few other bulk relief. Certainly, yes, building height, but we meet all of your setbacks and we exceed all of the lot dimensions on the property. And so for those reasons, I think that we also can meet the FAR building standard. And then the next variance, and that's the end of the D variances. I wanted to address our C variances of parking and loading, and I thought I would do those things, those two items together. So just as a reminder, we are required to provide a total of 176 parking spaces. We're proposing 15 parking spaces plus the 4 loading spaces, so for a total more or less of 19 parking spaces, because those loading spaces operate essentially the same as our parking spaces, or maybe the parking spaces operate essentially as the same as the loading spaces. But, bless you. So I see both of these, and for the loading, I should note, we are required to provide 5 spaces. We are proposing 4. I see both of these items as C2 variances. This is the flexible C, or benefits versus detriments. There are a handful of reasons why these deviations make more sense than what the zoning requires, and there are a couple of, there's one municipal land use law purpose that we also support. So that two. It's purpose I, which is promotion of a desirable visual environment, as well as purpose J, which is to promote the conservation of historic sites and districts, open space, energy resources, valuable natural resources. Bottom line, I think the site is much better without the additional 161 parking spaces on the site. It would be significantly more impervious cover, which would reduce the area that could be used for water infiltration. It also would reduce the amount of area that is green on the property, reduce the amount of area that could function for landscaping that would further soften the view of the building and perform environmental services. And as we've heard from our traffic expert, there's simply no need for this parking. It would simply be a detriment to the site in terms of appearance and for function. And I think that's particularly important here because we do have some of these sensitive land uses, those residential land uses that are going to be viewing this property on a daily basis. And then our last variance is the wall sign. I don't know that this has been brought up in detail, but let me just be clear. We have two proposed wall signs, and we require relief for one aspect of them, and that is the height of the sign, not the location on the building, but the height of the lettering itself. And I say that, I want to be clear, we do not require relief from the location of the wall signs, nor do we require relief from the area of the wall signs. It's just simply the height. Let me put the architectural plans up.
Just refer to the sheet, Beth, that you're going back to.
This is a 2.0, and here you can see the wall sign on the south elevation, which is the elevation that faces Victory Road. And our wall sign, our second wall sign, also faces road frontage, although it's Route 78. So as I said, this is simply a variance for the fact that our self-storage sign is located in 2 rows rather than 1 row. And I want to be really clear about the area. So we are proposing a total of 280 square feet. However, the maximum permitted is 589 square feet. So needless to say, we are well below and approximately half that which is permitted. Now, I'm supporting this variance request through Purpose I of the Municipal Land Use Law. I also see this as a C2, benefits versus detriments. Purpose I is to promote a desirable visual environment. And I've cited this simply because as I look at the signage shown on A 2.0, I think that our sign in the two rows of letters actually looks nicer than if we had it as a single row of self-storage. It fits nicer on the architecture of the building, and I think it really lends itself to a more appealing building. And for those reasons, I would request that the board grant us this, I think admittedly pretty small deviation to allow for the 2 rows of lettering.
And Beth, I know you're going to get to the negative criteria as to all the relief that we're seeking and as well as the D1. But just to go back to the D4, just to get on the record, because I think it's the same test as the D6, based on the Randolph Town Center case versus Randolph, you believe that the site can accommodate the additional FAR based on the fact that this is a low-intensity use, correct?
Absolutely.
And the traffic and parking testimony plays a lot into your support of that as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not having to park those vehicles from an aesthetic perspective and not having to have those vehicles come to and from the site from a functional, from an impact perspective is significantly helpful in the site being able to accommodate that increased FAR.
So you might not have the same opinion if it was another use, correct?
Absolutely not. My testimony, I'm not sure how it would justify some other uses in the zone at that proposed FAR.
And does the fact that we, like you said earlier, that we meet the coverages in the setback and that we're actually below what's required for coverage also support your testimony on that issue?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So for our negative criteria, there are 2 or maybe 3 aspects of that need to be addressed. It involves whether or not the proposal will create a substantial detriment to the public good, whether it would create a substantial detriment to the zone plan, and then last is a reconciliation of the variances, sometimes referred to as the Medici test. So I thought I would start with the zone plan, whether there's any substantial detriment to the zone plan. And I think there is not. I don't see any detriment to the zone plan, much less any substantial detriment. Now, I reviewed the master plan, and what I see are some general goals and objectives in regard to development or perhaps industrial development in the township, but I don't see any specific recommendations for the zone district or perhaps for this area of the township that are relevant to this application. But as I said, there are some general goals and objectives that I think support what we're proposing to do here tonight. We have, for example, land use goals and objectives number 2 is to avoid conflicting land uses and land uses which generate commercial traffic through residential areas with special attention paid to the neighborhood commercial zones and adjacent residential districts. So I don't think that aspect around the neighborhood commercial zones is relevant, but I think that the rest of this zone, or the rest of this language, is spot on. So we are seeking to create a use that's compatible with both the industrial zoning as well as compatible with the adjacent residences. And that's a difficult thing to do, but I think our self-storage facility fits the bill quite nicely. But in addition to that, we also have circulation goals and objectives that are relevant. We have a goal that states the circulation plan should strive to avoid commercial traffic routed through residential areas. And I selected this because we have a very low-intensity traffic use that is adjacent to residential uses. And so this is a great way to have an industrial site redeveloped without having the burden put on those adjacent homes. And then the last item in your master plan is from your land use element, and that's just simply bless you, that's just simply a statement that there are no changes to the industrial districts proposed. But I do see those couple of land use and circulation goals and objectives that are relevant and supportive of the application. The second component of the negative criteria is whether there's any substantial detriment to the public good. And I think the answer to that is no. And in fact, I see a lot of benefits to the community as a result of our application. But more specifically, as I said earlier, I think overall, this is an opportunity to have a site that's unsightly, frankly, to be redeveloped with a use that is going to be that will be nice looking and that will have very limited impact on the adjacent residences, and in fact is going to provide a service for potentially for those adjacent residences in the sense that they now have self-storage that's conveniently located to their apartment or perhaps otherwise smaller housing unit. But as part of that, this is very clearly a transitional property in the sense that we have this industrial use industrial zoning adjacent to the commercial uses, and this is really a unique opportunity to take advantage of that. But some of the other benefits that are relevant that we've hit upon throughout the testimony this evening is more green space, less impervious cover, not only less for the site but also compliant. We're not seeking bulk standards, bulk relief aside from obviously the height variance, but we meet all of your lot dimensions, we meet your setback requirements, as well as building cover requirement, I should note. We're also proposing to update or upgrade the stormwater management on the property from a situation now where there's just simply sheet flow out to the street. We'll be improving that if we're lucky enough to get to site plan with folks. We have a use with very little traffic, again, reducing the impact. And we're also proposing a building design that seeks to, yes, mitigate the increased FAR and the building height, but also is really nice looking, something that is a significant improvement to what exists on the property and something that will complement both the residences adjacent as well as the office and industrial uses that surround the property. And so for all of these reasons, I think that our application could be approved without substantial detriment to the public good or to the zone plan. And then that last item I want to address is the reconciliation of the variances, sometimes referred to as the Medici test. And that simply asks, why is, in layman's terms, why is the use not included in your zoning ordinance if it makes so much sense? And simply put, this is really an up-and-coming use. It's a new generation of self-storage facilities. It's not the older self-storage facilities with the roll-up doors. It's or a low-slung industrial building. Instead, this is a building that has a look and a character that looks more like an office or maybe a residential building, but has much less of the traffic and the activity associated with those uses. But also, as part of this being a more modern or evolving use, I think it's noteworthy that the use has really become more in demand since your master plan reexamination report was last prepared. I believe it back in 2005. This is not a use that I had seen back then. I think I've seen more self-storage facilities in this type of design in the last 2 or 3 years than I have in my entire career. And so I'm not surprised when I come to a community and find that they don't permit these uses because, frankly, the last time the zoning code was updated was when you had a very different picture in mind for this type of a use. And so for those reasons, I think we also meet the Medici test.
Okay, and that your testimony on the negative criteria applies to all of the relief that we're seeking, both D and C variance relief?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I know that was extensive, but we felt we'd get to put it on the record, so thank you.
Any board members have any questions for the witness? None. Okay, our professionals? Catherine?
This mic. Thank you for the testimony, Ms. McManus. I think she covered all of the proofs, but I do have a few comments related to some of the variance testimony. I'll start with the D4, the FAR variance, the floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is a function of controlling building massing. So it pretty much gives the opportunity to either expand the building footprint along, a bigger footprint rather than go up, or go up and have a smaller footprint. So it's a ratio of the land. But I do think it does lend itself in some respects to the intensity of what that massing looks like, especially when it is deviated from. I will say that the standard that exists in the ordinance is probably more akin and related to the permitted uses in the zone that probably wouldn't take advantage of building height. So manufacturing, processing, warehousing, probably going to be a 1-story, 1.5-story building. Daycare centers, business and office, professional office use might be the one that takes advantage of height, building height, but would likely have a smaller building footprint. And I only bring that up because, and I think this will relate eventually when I get to the D6 for height, but while the bulk standards for this proposed building are not deviated from, they're still under building coverage, I think what's important to note is that they're just under the building coverage, but they exceed the height. And so it's a function, FAR is a function of both, building coverage and height. The board's test, or the criteria in which they can judge the FAR variance is really related to more to a conditional use variance, where you're saying whether or not the site can accommodate problems associated with the proposed permitted use, but at a larger floor area than what's permitted. So, like I said, the standard that exists in the zoning ordinance is likely more related to those uses where they require more parking and a smaller building footprint, whereas what's being proposed is a bigger building footprint with less parking. But I do think there is a relation here with the building height as well that can't be ignored as far as how it relates to FAR and how that goes up and up as you add building stories with large coverage. And so I just want the board to keep that in mind with the testimony that was provided for the FAR. Still under that threshold. My bigger issue is with the D6 variance and the testimony that was provided, at least from the standard in which it was looked at. And that is the Grosso versus Spring Lake case I don't think is applicable here. That's in the case where a height variance is being sought for a use that's permitted in the zone. As I outlined in my memo, you have to look at D6 variance for a non-permitted use in the lens of the Medici standard. And in that case, the board has to consider whether the placement of the structure at the proposed non-permitted height at the subject location is necessary in order that the structure achieve its permitted purpose, and also consider whether the same result could be achieved by erecting the structure in a location where the height of the structure could be lessened, or by erecting the permitted structure at a lower height at the proposed location. That's the SMR Fair Lawn Board of Adjustment case. That's what applies here, and I think that's the test and the lens in which the board has to judge the D6, not the Grosso case. I think also under that same standard of a height variance being sought at a non-permitted use, there's an enhanced quality of proof that the board has to look at, that there'll be no substantial impairment of the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance in the zone plan. So you have to reconcile that the proposed height with the ordinance's prohibition of that height in the zone is at issue. And so I think, again, that's what the board needs to judge it on, not the Grosso standard. Beyond that, I don't think, I appreciate the testimony on the D1. I think that was, all the proofs were hit there. But like I said, I don't know if they want to respond under the SMR versus Fair Lawn, and understanding that this is a non-permitted use with a height variance, rather than what was testified to as far as the other standard.
Thank you.
We can address it if
Yes, please do.
you'd like, sure. So, Beth, would the same analysis occur that you used for the FA, and I think the board's pointer also went through this actually very appropriately as well, that the bulk standards and the height standards and the FAR really apply to permitted uses, which would also apply to the height as well. So can you address the height as it relates to a self-storage facility that may be less intense than some of the other permitted uses in the zone, such as warehousing, manufacturing, office, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not surprised to see a building height of 40 feet in this particular district, particularly given the fact that we're here for a use variance. I think as alluded in your planner's testimony, some of your permitted uses are unlikely to take advantage of that building height. If you think about a typical manufacturing facility, they're often 1 story, maybe 2 stories in some locations. And so I'm not surprised to see a building height that doesn't exceed 40 feet in anticipation of those types of uses. Your other uses permitted in the district that might take advantage of that height are office. I'm not surprised to see a larger building height or perhaps an FAR for that particular use, because they are much more intense land uses. The enlarged building height, and if it had a complementary FAR, it would yield significantly more activity and traffic to and from the site. But here, with our proposed use of self-storage, as I had said in my Medici testimony, I'm not surprised to see that the use has not been accounted for in your zoning ordinance because it's new, particularly as compared to some of your planning documents. And for the same reason, I would not expect to see a building height or perhaps an FAR increase to match this type of a use that the zoning ordinance simply could not anticipate when it was drafted.
And also, you also talked about particular suitability as to the use. What's to the board's pointer's comment, particular suitability as to the height. Does the lot shape, the depth, all those characteristics that you talked about as it relates to particular suitability, plus the design that sets it back significant from the property line and from the building line, would that play into your analysis that the height is particularly suited for this property and the proposed use?
Yeah, some of the things I talked about was how our our lot depth was more than, nearly double that which is permitted. 150 feet is required. We have 284 feet. I think that contributes to the site's ability to accommodate the building height. In addition to that, as well as the FAR, I think it's also noteworthy the fact that Our site is uniquely situated in the zone district, as I had mentioned, with the increased building depth, lot depth compared to other properties, and also location in the township, in your northeast corner of the township. So, yes, uniquely suited. It also means that it has less impact on the community as a whole, since we're not centrally located. And then, of course, we also addressed building height through some of the mitigation techniques that we talked about in terms of architecture, as well as pushing the building towards the rear of the property to the extent possible.
Okay, and your testimony on the negative criteria would still be consistent with the testimony you previously gave?
Certainly, as I said, in the negative criteria, we're supported by your master plan policies, and and I don't find any substantial detriment to the public good. In fact, I see a number of benefits to the public good as a result of this application.
All right, great, thank you. I hope that addressed the comments from your planner.
Thank you.
I mean, from an engineering and site plan perspective, it's a bifurcated case. All of the normal site plan issues, traffic, stormwater, that will all be addressed if you find the use compatible and the height compatible. So I don't take any issue when it's, traffic, stormwater, signage. You heard the one variance request. In terms of what I heard the term transitional, well-suited, and you won't see 78. You do have a residential across the street, so I don't know if the planner can identify the height or the stories of the cove. You've got Columbia Court within view of this as well, so I don't know if she's looked at that. And then I would say, what I did was I looked at the other self-storage facilities in the area, just concentrically went from here, and I just have a difficult time justifying across from a residential area the 5-story issue. I'm not sure that creating a 55-foot tall building adjacent to, across the street from a residential property is good planning. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't know, did you go to the residential properties to analyze their height?
I visited this site and the surrounding area, but I can't tell you that I did an analysis of the building heights for the adjacent and nearby residences. I think that the residences directly across the street, the Cove, are at 4 stories, but I don't know if they exceed the 40-foot height limit in the zone. When I
looked at the Google Earth, the Cove and Columbia Court were 3 stories high. Did you look at any of the other storage facilities in terms of specifically the height?
No, I'm not reviewing those. No.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the public, because I have to. If there's anyone present that has any questions for this witness regarding the testimony that she presented. Okay, there are none. Do you have any further witnesses?
No, not at this time. I know that there were some comments from the board engineer and planner. They were really focused on the height. Does the board share that? We feel we met our burden, but does the board share that concern? I guess would be my question.
Okay, I'll start with the members of the board.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I would be interested to see, number one, Mr. Disco touched on this just now. I would be interested to see the height comparison to the surrounding uses, the building. I know there's like an office structure, I think not adjacent to, but one lot over, and the residential across the way, because I do believe that it's 3 stories. I don't think that it's 4 stories. That would be the first. I also would like to know what the reduction in the FAR would be if the height was to be reduced. I'm wondering if 1 story would bring it closer to compliance with 40.
I believe, Madam Chair, that, I'm not the architect, but just hypothetically speaking, the testimony was that the 4th story, the front of the building, which we said was shorter, which is a 4th story, was at 43 feet 10 inches. So if we, I guess what you were indicating is if we chopped off the fifth story, what would be the height of the building? And I believe it would be 40, it would no longer require a D
Yeah,
variance.
you wouldn't need the D6.
That's correct. It would be a C variance. That's correct. If that were the number, it would be roughly 3 feet 10 inches above what's required. Setback more than double what's required in the ordinance from a setback perspective.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I think that, and I'm not speaking for all the members of the board.
Understood.
They could speak, but I believe that based on the fair lawn standards, I'm not sure that the height with the surrounded uses and the surrounding heights of the buildings is necessary for this particular site. That was like the standard, and that the use as a low intense use could be permitted, but not necessarily at the height that you are.
Right,
You are proposing.
And if that were to occur, let's say that we were to make that modification, the FAR would obviously go down because you'd lose, significant square footage by removing that fifth story portion.
Half of fifth story? then?
Correct, yeah, it's 4.5, I should have said 4.5.
Yes. So that would be what I would like to see, or that would be
I agree,
my feelings on it.
I agree, because the use that you're requesting for the storage facility doesn't need to be above the existing ordinance of 40 feet. You can make it work within that use, for that use, under the 40 feet requirement. It doesn't have to be 55 feet in order for it to work.
Yeah, no, I understand the concern. We felt that we had a good case for it, but I do understand the comments based on the property, location, and its unique characteristics, but that's why we're having this dialogue.
Yeah, because the residential, like I said, is 3, and then the surrounding industrial or commercial type uses, you're really seeing 1 story. So I don't know that it's necessary.
Okay. Okay.
So, I don't know where that brings us to. Going to, I guess we can.
Can I have 1 second with the client? Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. Was that all the comments? I just want to make sure.
Sorry, members of the board, any other comments?
Until I'm assured that the fire department can accommodate even a 5-story facility, whether it's all the way in the back or in the front. I've got problems with the concept.
Okay.
Okay.
And the top floor isn't a half story, it's a full story. Yeah, this one is being only half the building area still. They do a half story, but that's usually when it's like. Yeah, we should refer to the building code as far as half stories.
Right. Right, that's true.
Is to everything for story, building height.
That's true.
They should just be a standard definition you have to use based on the building code. You're welcome. That's my only normal colored pen. All my other pens are pink or purple or.
That's a good,
That makes them better. That's the only one.
this is probably, well, the thing is though, is if looking at this concept rendering, elevation, sorry, that appears to be at the 43, what you see in the surrounding residential.
We have all tried cases.
The white line about 20% down,
Yeah.
that's the top of the front audience. And then it goes back.
One of my clients was staying in New Jersey, and there was a claim that the facility, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You just take off the fifth, they don't eliminate less, but now you're.
Deleterious from a health perspective.
Right,
And maybe that doesn't matter.
Defend the case. And the state
right, if it comes down, it may not be as offensive. Are we in agreement that, I guess we have to be, that that's actually a through? That we're not looking at a rear setback, deviation? Because that's it, like rear building.
What does that matter? I mean,
Come up, we're not judges. We just play it.
thing of that, it was brought by, the cases were brought by the oldest female attorney in the state. The first, no, I think the third or fourth, she retired, and I wound up trying all these cases against John Rosenberg, who became one of my closest. And also knows good places. That it is. You do much litigation or is that?
My office, we do complex, high stakes, divorce and family matters and real estate related litigation mostly. We do a lot of consumer fraud type cases. Big civil rights case against the State Bar Association. We won. I'm the plaintiff, not even the lawyer. That's most important.
For me, it was all, always had a medical genesis, whether workers' comp, medical mal, or,
Hit your home runs.
yeah.
Were you, did you have partners? Were you alone?
Partners. I would never want to do what you do.
I don't do very much anymore, but it's.
No, I mean in the sense that I always wanted somebody to be able to mind the store if I wanted. I'm talking about you being a lone wolf.
That is literally. That is literally my. You can't see it, but there's a wolf blowing cold air.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
I've always had partners.
It's a good life. I'm trying to.
But of course, there are other problems with having partners, or potentially, if you, that's why I'm selling the property that I'm selling.
Look, you did what you did. That's, now it's a different model.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Springfield too?
Union. And also a small town in Vermont. You a skier, or have you?
I tried to ski, tried to snowboard. I looked incompetent.
I lived about, for about 10 years. In fact, I lived there for a few years. I lived a few miles from Killington down as a non-skier.
Okay, we're back. So, Mr.
Yes.
It's my understanding that you would like to.
Yes, so I'd like to amend the application based on what the board's comments and the board's professional comments are. So we would basically eliminate the fifth story, which would then make the height be there would be a C variance for height. It would just be over 40 feet, slightly over 40 feet. And we would lose 20,022 square feet of FAR as part of that. There would also be conditions based on what we've talked about earlier, EV charging station, and a requirement. Remember, if this board votes in the affirmative on the bifurcation, we have to come back to this board for the site plan. The site plan stays with this board. So my understanding, based on your concern with the fire official, we would condition, if the board were to review favorably, that we would have to meet with the fire official before coming back for site plan, and we'd have to satisfy the fire official as part of the site plan process. That would be a condition. And then I believe those were the only ones. So there's only 6 members. I'd prefer not to come back with 7. I know typically with the D variance, you want 7. So I'd ask if the board if that's okay with the board, we'd like to take a vote tonight. If that's not, then we'd like to take a vote with 7. That would be, that's my ask, Madam Chair.
I think, Chairwoman, there was one other, it wasn't a condition
Sorry.
necessarily, but there was
Did
one
I miss one?
other question about the driveway configuration. I know that your engineer had mentioned that a letter of no interest was sought from the DOT, but I didn't know if the board wanted to elaborate on any other conditions related to the driveway access.
The only thing, you're right, I had written down one thing right here, I see that the I call it U-Haul, but the deliveries or the larger vehicles could only enter through the center and could not enter through I guess it was the westerly driveway on the site. That I had that written down as well.
Does that satisfy the board, or do they want something in addition to that?
That's what
that-
I was
that would
looking for.
satisfy you.
Yeah, for me, that would satisfy that
Yeah.
Far West would not be an entrance for.
Correct. I mean, nothing, correct.
Yes, that would satisfy us. Okay.
Okay. So-
So,
I'll move to vote on bifurcation. Right?
if we were voting, we're voting for the use.
You're voting for the D variances, and
Two D variances that remain,
the two D variances that remain,
and the C variances, which will now include just the height.
correct. And then, and conditions, would be under the statute, but per 76B of the MLUL, we would have to come back, and then we added the conditions related to the traffic, and related to meeting with the fire official and the EV charging stations.
Okay.
I'll just offer based upon the 20,000.
Right.
plus floor area, the FAR would go to from 2.6 to about 2.3.
That's why she gets the big bucks.
You know, as far, about 2.3. I'm rounding off 2.29. The height, you know, everywhere would be the 43, was it 10 and a half inches?
Yeah, I asked the architect, it was actually 42.8.
Okay. It's only important, I think, because at 44 feet, you're 10%.
Correct.
And the D would renew itself. So, I heard the site engineer say they didn't work through the grading yet. So the height is based upon the grading. So I'm not trying to delay or defer, but you're voting on something that is, you know, 1.5 inches on the height, based upon an architectural drawing.
You sure you want to vote tonight?
Wait,
Well,
See with the C variance, and then when they come back for site plan, it's actually D, they'd have to seek additional.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Pointing out the issue.
Yeah.
okay. That's,
The only other thing I have to add is that we were looking at the definitions, because there is a basement level to this. And so if you look, the definition for story isn't great, but when you look at the definition of basement, what they have does qualify. So even though they are shopping or eliminating the top story, it actually was 6 stories. It was basement level and then 5 stories on top. It's still gonna be a request for 5 stories and 42.8 feet for the height. Does not matter what the variance, I just wanna have that clear.
what are the permitted stories in the in the zone?
2 and 40 feet.
2 above grade or 2 total?
2 stories.
So now they're asking for 4 above grade.
Yes.
Right, but you could do 1 story at 40 feet or 2 stories at 40 feet. So regardless, we're,
The stories don't matter about the variance, it's just good to have
Yeah.
that down in the resolution.
I'll repeat the question. Sure you want to vote tonight?
well, that's why I asked the board, if the board's comfortable with the way that we've amended the application. We're fine with the 42-foot, we're fine with it being a C variance. I've confirmed with the architect.
Well, there's a question out there that can they comply to the height? That wasn't raised.
If the board wants us to come back with that, we can come back, we can do that. Well, it wouldn't be comply with the height, but you mean eliminate the D variance?
I think it would be beneficial for us to see the changes.
Okay.
That's just me speaking.
I mean, you would see it at site plan. So at site plan, just to reiterate, we'd have to still meet the negative criteria in a bifurcated application. So we'd have to go through that again, just per the statute. But that's why I asked. There's 6 members of the board. If not all, if 5 aren't comfortable with it, then we'll come back. That's all.
Okay,
You can. You can separate that part of it.
is the board comfortable, I'm satisfied with the proofs on the use that's proposed at this site. I would be okay, I would be okay voting on the use, the D1, and then having the applicant come back with the plans showing the decrease in the height, figuring out, calculating the grade, figuring out the grade, and coming back with accurate numbers with respect to the height.
So I understand your point about seeing the height. So why don't we, because we're saying we're going to do a C variance for height, and we asked for the board to approve that. Why don't we, as the chairwoman, say punt that for a second and do the D1 and the D5, that's it. Come back with a site plan application, and there is where you would approve the C variance, because you would have all the grading. And if you didn't think 42.8 was sufficient, we'd have to comply with 40.
I don't know that I want to do the FAR,
Okay,
because I don't know that the calculations,
that's fair, that's fine,
I don't know that everyone's clear on the calculation.
that's fine, that's fine.
That's just me, so.
You could do the D1, and then we can come back with a site plan that also included the FAR, that's fine.
Okay. So I'm comfortable voting on the use
Is that with the conditions that we discussed, though?
with the conditions that were discussed.
Yes, but you'll also get a second shot at conditions on the site plan, but
Right.
we have the conditions.
And just in fairness to the applicants, because there are 6 members, is that okay with the rest of the board?
Oh, just the use, just the.
Yes.
I'm ready to vote on the use.
Okay.
Just on the use, sure.
Great. Would you like to make a motion? Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve the D1 use for self-storage in the zone with the conditions. Do we have all of them, Bruce?
I have as conditions that they will comply with the EV rules. They will get the approval of the fire official. Large vehicles will only be able to enter and leave through the center driveway.
Okay.
I want to say there was one more, but
Do we have to define large vehicle? Is that too broad?
we could say, rather than large vehicle,
I think we should come back.
anything other than a normal passenger vehicle.
Yeah, I think based on the reaction that there are certain board members that might not be comfortable with the fact that they don't have the calculations that we talked about, let's just carry this, and let's just get you everything that you need. Let's get you what the FAR is, let's get you what the height is, let's do the grading. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable voting on something that maybe isn't as perfect as it could be.
Okay.
You withdraw the motion?
I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Thank you, sorry.
Just before we do, your plan is to come back on January 17th?
Yeah, I think that,
So the motion would be to adjourn the matter to January 17th, our next regular meeting. Upon that motion, there'd be no need for further notice because it's
17th.
noticed here at the meeting.
Move to table to the 17th.
Second.
Ms. Cohen,
Yes.
since we're getting into a lot of issues with this application, and since he's got a month to do it, could we get a proposed resolution so that we can actually look at a piece of paper? And rather than do this verbally?
In other words, you want the conditions on paper?
Yeah, yeah.
Bruce, could we muster that?
Can we, well, I think it would just be maybe a memo to the board?
I mean, there's just a
Regarding
lot out,
what was
there's just a
discussed?
lot here on the
Yeah.
table.
Okay, so we'll have that prepared to distribute to the board.
Presumably, we're gonna see revised plans, we can regurgitate those conditions in our
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a motion to carry table, and I seconded it. And do we have
Let's vote.
a vote?
Okay, Vice Chair
I'm sorry,
Lawfer?
just
Oh, one more.
motion to carry
Sorry.
to January 17th, 2023.
Yes.
6 o'clock, no further notice in this room. Okay.
I vote yes.
Chair Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yes.
Mr. Furstenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Sahada?
Yes.
Mr. Weckstein? Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Guys, happy holidays. Enjoy.